Hey guys, it's Chalk here from the Grimdark Geek, and it has arrived. That's right, 10th edition Ork Codex. And so let's talk about orcs, all right? So, orcs have been my favorite faction since the Rogue Trader days. Well, orcs and squats. And I'll talk about squats in a different video, and when I say squats, I'm not talking Leagues of Votann. But let's go back to orcs. So what are the orcs? We all know them as the lovable Krumpen, fungus, lichen, hybrid, green guys that just love to fight and drink and fight and drink and fight and drink. And that's basically all they do. So what else do we know about them? What do we know about their origins outside of the lore? Well, Games Workshop and the guys at Games Workshop used a lot of prevalent stereotypes from that was floating around back in the day in the 80s when they did this. Of course, it all started with the traditional fantasy orcs, spelled with a C. And, you know, we had Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer Fantasy had orcs in them. In the first couple of editions of Warhammer Fantasy, the orcs were not fungus. They were actually had male and female orcs, and we know this because you could play a half-orc character. You could have half-orc armies, not characters, because it wasn't role-playing, really. Remember, Games Workshop also owns the license to Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, so they had a lot of history doing fantasy stuff. And when Rogue Trader came around, they decided to do orcs in space, along with knights in space, which are space marines, and elves in space, which are Eldar, or now Eldari, and the whole thing. But what did they base the orcs on other than the fantasy trope? Well, there were two big influences to orcs. The first was football hooligans. So these were football fans that would travel around Europe, English fans, getting drunk, starting fights, and basically crumping. And the other influence was the booming counterculture of the punk scene in the 70s and early 80s. And you could really see that in the prevalence of checks and heavy boots and spikes and all. There's a really heavy punk influence in the aesthetic of the orcs and the way that they acted. So football hooligans and orcs, and punks and orcs, what do they have in common? They fight authority, they love crumping, they love getting pissed, and they love having a good time. And that's what orcs are. Orcs are like the least organized faction. You can do whatever you want with them and just have fun. Especially now in 10th edition, it doesn't even really matter what color you paint your orcs. It never really mattered what color you painted your orcs, but clan culture and all doesn't really apply anymore. It doesn't really matter if you are bad moons or, evil sons or flash gits or any of that. You're just orcs. And it really goes by, what sort of core detachments that you're running. And there are 5 core detachments in the book. We aren't going to get into that right now. But just know that you have even more freedom than you used to have with the orcs. You can paint them however you want. You want to paint them red because red ones go faster. You want to paint them blue because blue's lucky. You want to take the easy way out and say you painted them purple because purple is sneaky and then just put a whole bunch of blank bases on the table. You can do that. That's okay. A whole bunch of some of my favorite units have gone to Legends, though. Especially things like Grot tanks and, the Chinook helicopter or Choppa. Some of the more wonderful things aren't there anymore. We still have some good stuff. We still have like the Bubba Chucker, and it works a lot better than it used to. There's a lot less chance and a lot more of the possibility of it doing some real damage, so that's cool. But once again, we'll talk about that later. So what are orcs to me, and why am I doing this? Well, I'm starting sort of a orc theme on my channel, and also be starting on YouTube, because even though orcs have been my favorite faction since I started being involved in 40K back in the late 80s, back with Rogue Trader, I haven't had an orc army. At least I haven't had an orc army since 3rd edition. When I got back into sort of the building part of the hobby during COVID, I did start buying orcs, and that's presented me with a problem. This is my problem. I have a lot of orcs to build. And so I'm going to take you along on that journey. So yeah, it's going to be a long journey. I'm not planning on painting this unit by unit. I've got some ones started back there, and which I'll show later. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to build an army so I can see it all together. So I'm going to glue it all up. Then I'm going to move on to the priming and the zenithal component of it. And after that, then I'll start painting it up unit by unit. But I want to put the army together. I want to see an army assembled and all put together on my shelf. And then we're going to go from there. So you'll be able to follow me here on TikTok. You can also, I'm going to start doing these and doing some longer form videos on YouTube, although this is a pretty long video. And also you can follow my progress on my podcast, which is Under the Hive of Madness. You can look that up. Here we have clips on TikTok. You can also find Under the Hive of Madness everywhere you get your podcasts. Sirius, Apple, Google, Anchor, there are a whole bunch of places. And we're on Patreon and we're on Discord. So look us up, follow along, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. Peace, guys.